The grand hall of the Zareth Empire shimmered like liquid gold, a vast chamber where even the bravest of alien generals dared not lift their eyes. Thousands of armored warriors knelt, heads pressed to the cold floor as the air trembled with power. At the far end, upon a throne carved from a single black crystal, sat Empress Varelna, the ruler of 50 star systems and the terror of 100 species. Her gaze alone could crush a soldier's will. Her voice could decide who lived and who vanished into the void. No one dared meet her eyes, not even her own guards, for to do so was to challenge her rule. It was said that once, a warlord of the Drakkar race tried, and his body turned to dust before he could blink. Since then, silence ruled the hall whenever she entered, broken only by the slow rhythm of her breathing. Today, however, the silence was different. There was a whisper spreading through the kneeling crowd, a strange tension, a foreign presence. A human had been summoned. The galaxy feared the Zareth, but the Empress had grown curious about one rumor, the species called humanity. They were said to be unpredictable, emotional, and terrifying when angered. Yet fragile when wounded, some claimed they came from a death world, a planet where everything tried to kill them. Others said they were extinct. The Empress wanted to see the truth herself. The great doors opened with a roar of energy. 2 guards marched in, dragging a man between them, tall, scarred, and dressed in worn combat armor that looked older than the Empire itself. Chains bound his wrists, but his stride was steady. His steps echoed in defiance. Every alien eye turned toward him, though none dared look up for long. The human's name was Commander Aaron Cole, a survivor from the Terran Defense Fleet, lost during the last Galactic War. For 10 years he had wandered the stars, captured by slavers, sold to warlords, and finally delivered here, to the throne of the most feared being in the galaxy. He stopped before the Empress's throne, his eyes level. The guards forced him to his knees, but he resisted, muscles straining, until one guard struck him across the back. Still, he didn't bow. The crowd froze, breath held, knowing what came next. Empress Varelna's voice filled the hall. Soft yet sharp as a blade. "Human," she said. "Do you understand where you stand?" Her golden eyes glowed faintly, the air shimmering with energy. "Before the throne of the Zareth Empress, conqueror of the 9th spiral, destroyer of the Galtan lords," she continued, "every warrior who stands here kneels in my presence. Every empire that breathes does so by my mercy." Aaron looked up, and for the first time in centuries, someone met her gaze. Gasps rippled through the hall. Claws tightened, wings trembled, tails coiled. No one had dared, not even the High Council. But the human didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't lower his head. "You speak of mercy," he said calmly, his voice echoing against the gold walls. "But I see fear." For a heartbeat, even the Empress seemed still. Her lips curved slightly, not in anger, but in something else, in curiosity. "Fear?" she repeated. "Explain, Terran." Aaron's eyes glowed faintly with reflected light. "You rule through terror," he said, "but those who bow to you don't respect you and they fear you. And fear doesn't last forever." A murmur swept through the hall, like a storm moving through dry grass. Some guards moved forward, but the Empress raised a single hand. The hall fell silent again. She leaned forward, studying him with eyes that could burn through metal. "You're either very brave," she whispered, "or very foolish, maybe both," Aaron replied, his voice steady. "Where I come from, Empress, we don't kneel to gods, we talk to them." The hall froze completely. The words hung heavy in the air like thunder before the strike. Even the throne itself seemed to hum with restrained energy. And then, for the first time in living memory, the Empress laughed. It was soft at first, then louder, sharp and beautiful, a sound that made her warriors tremble. "Interesting," she said. "Perhaps humanity isn't extinct after all." She stood, the throne pulsing with light as her aura expanded. "Then let us see, human," she said, "how long your defiance can survive." With a gesture, she signaled her guards, "And take him to the arena," she ordered. "Let the galaxy witness what happens when one refuses to bow." As the guards dragged him away, Aaron's eyes never left hers, and deep within those golden flames, the Empress saw something she had never seen before. Not hatred, not fear, but a quiet, unshakable human resolve. A spark that perhaps could burn an empire. The arena beneath the Zareth Palace was a place of death. It was where traitors, rebels, and captured enemies were thrown to be broken. Thousands of alien spectators filled the stands, roaring for blood, the sound shaking the ground like thunder. The Empress watched from her high balcony, calm, silent. Her golden eyes locked on the single figure being led into the pit. Commander Aaron Cole walked with his head high, though heavy iron chains clinked around his wrists and ankles. His body bore fresh wounds from the guards, but his spirit stood unbroken. He glanced around, towering walls of black metal, energy barriers crackling, alien banners hanging high. Creatures from 100 worlds shouted insults, throwing fragments of metal and glowing dust into the air. The announcer's voice echoed, booming through the chamber. "Before us stands the Terran who defied the Empress," the voice declared. The human who dared look into Her Majesty's eyes. Laughter spread through the crowd like wildfire, cruel and mocking. To them, this was not a fight. It was a show, a reminder of what happens to those who defy the throne. Aaron didn't react. He simply looked up toward the Empress's balcony. Even from this distance, he could feel her presence, cold. Commanding, yet strangely curious, he smiled faintly, a gesture that made several guards flinch. No fear, no hesitation, only that quiet confidence that had unsettled even the Empress herself. A metallic gate opened on the far side of the arena. From the darkness came a beast 3 meters tall, covered in scales and armor-plated hide. Its eyes glowed red, claws scraping against the stone. It was a crag beast, a predator bred for war, strong enough to tear through tanks. The crowd screamed in excitement, demanding blood. Aaron flexed his hands, feeling the rough texture of his chains. He whispered under his breath, "Terran steel," and pulled. The sound of snapping metal filled the air, sharp and sudden. Gasps rippled through the arena as the chains fell from his wrists like dust. The guards froze, their energy rifles half raised. Uncertain, Aaron rolled his shoulders, his calm eyes fixed on the creature now charging toward him. The beast roared, claws outstretched, jaws wide. Aaron didn't move until the last second, then sidestepped with impossible precision. His hand shot out, grabbing the beast's neck. With a twist that cracked the air, the monster's head slammed into the arena floor. The ground splitting beneath it, the audience went silent, the echo of impact ringing like a bell of defiance. From the balcony, the Empress leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable. She had seen warriors fight before, but never like this. The human's movements were efficient, disciplined. But there was something else. Emotion. He fought not to survive, but to make a statement. The beast rose again, bleeding, roaring in fury. Aaron's face remained calm, his voice quiet. "Stay down," he murmured when it lunged again. He moved faster, too fast for the crowd to follow. With a single punch, the beast fell, the ground shaking as it collapsed, lifeless, silence. Then the arena exploded in disbelief. Thousands shouted, roared, screamed, but above all that chaos, one truth spread through every mind present. The human had won. Aaron looked up again at the Empress, his chest rising and falling slowly. He didn't bow, didn't speak. He simply met her eyes again. That same gaze that had once silenced galaxies now met resistance. A steady, unflinching human stare. For the second time that day, she found herself unable to look away. Around her, the nobles whispered in fear. "This is impossible," said one. "He broke the chains," hissed another. "He defied the arena," whispered a third. And yet the Empress said nothing. Finally, she stood, her robes flowing like liquid fire. Her voice carried across the arena. Calm but cold. "Release him," she commanded. Gasps followed. "Release him?" No one survived the arena. The guards hesitated, but no one dared question her. Aaron was unchained completely. His armor returned, his wounds treated by trembling medics. As he was led from the arena floor, the Empress turned to her aide. "Bring him to the upper chambers," she ordered quietly. "I will speak to him alone." Her aide bowed deeply. "Yes, my Empress." She looked once more at the spot where the human had stood victorious. There was a flicker in her eyes, and not anger, but something dangerously close to admiration. The galaxy had always feared her gaze, but for the first time, someone had looked back, and she could not stop thinking about it. The chamber was silent except for the low hum of alien energy crystals lighting the walls. It was the private throne room, a place where few had ever entered and lived to speak of it. Commander Aaron Cole stood in the center, his wrists no longer chained, his armor polished but still scarred. He had been washed, fed, and escorted by silent guards whose eyes never met his. The air smelled faintly of silver and ozone. At the far end of the chamber, behind a shimmering curtain of golden mist, the Empress Virelna appeared. Her robes flowed like starlight. Her crown pulsed softly with blue light, and her steps made no sound when she approached. Even the guards lowered their heads instantly. But Aaron did not. Their eyes met again, gold and steel. Fire and calm. The Empress paused, perhaps expecting him to finally yield. He didn't. Instead, he simply said, "You wanted to speak." The tone was respectful. Not defiant, and yet somehow equal. Her voice carried the weight of galaxies. "You destroyed my arena beast," she said slowly. "A creature that has killed hundreds. And you broke the chains forged by my royal engineers." She circled him like a predator studying strange prey. "What are you, human?" Aaron smiled slightly. "Just a soldier." Her eyes narrowed. "Lies." She stepped closer, until her face was inches from his, her gaze burning like a star. "No soldier looks into my eyes without trembling," she whispered. "No soldier dares speak to me without permission." Aaron didn't move. "I've seen worse," he said quietly. "I've watched worlds burn, friends die, and stars go dark." He looked straight at her, his voice soft but steady. "You don't scare me, Empress. Not because you're weak, but because I've already met fear, and survived it." Her breath caught. Almost imperceptibly, for the first time, she saw not arrogance but experience, the weight of loss and memory behind those human eyes. There was power in that kind of pain. She turned away, her golden hair catching the light. "You speak boldly for a species that the galaxy barely remembers," she said. "Humans are a myth to many now, ghosts from the old wars." Aaron chuckled softly. "Ghosts still leave footprints." The Empress stopped, a small smile touching her lips. "Rare, sharp, dangerous. You are bold, human," she said. "And boldness amuses me." She gestured for him to walk beside her. Together they moved through the vast chamber, past walls carved with ancient battles and names of extinct species. She stopped before a mural showing her younger self standing over the ruins of a conquered world. "This was Galtora Prime," she said. "They defied me once." Her hand traced the carved flames. "Now their sun burns no more." Aaron looked at the mural, his jaw tightening slightly. "Did they deserve it?" he asked, her eyes flicked toward him. "Deserve has no place in rule," she said. "Only order and obedience." He shook his head slowly. "Then you've already lost." Her brows lifted. "Explain." "When you take away choice," Aaron said, "you take away what makes them alive. You can force them to obey, but the moment your power falters, they'll rise." He looked at her directly. "You can't rule forever by fear." The Empress stared at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. For centuries she had ruled without question, every world bending to her command, and yet this human, this fragile creature, stood there and spoke as if she were just another soldier. Something deep inside her stirred, not anger, not pride, something older, something she had forgotten long ago. "Tell me," she said softly, "if fear cannot rule, then what can?" Aaron looked at her, his voice calm. "Respect, trust, loyalty earned, not demanded." He turned slightly toward the mural again. "The galaxy may kneel, but not all who kneel are loyal." Her lips parted slightly, her gaze drifting downward for a heartbeat. No one had ever spoken to her like this, no one had dared. And yet she found herself listening not as an empress, but as someone who had once been curious about what lay beyond power. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the golden crystals. Finally she spoke again, her tone softer. "You intrigue me, human," she said. "Perhaps too much." She turned to her guards. "Leave us." The guards hesitated. Such an order was unheard of, but obeyed, leaving the chamber quietly. Now it was just the two of them, alone under the glowing walls of the throne room. The Empress took a slow breath, her eyes studying him with quiet intensity. "You looked into my eyes," she said, "and lived." Aaron smiled faintly. "Maybe because I saw something there worth looking at." Her gaze flickered, surprise, confusion, and something else, something warm. No one had ever said such words to her. For the first time in her long reign, the Empress of the Zareth did not feel like a goddess. She felt seen, and that perhaps frightened her more than any human weapon could. Night on Zareth Prime was unlike night on any other world. The sky shimmered with twin moons and rivers of light that flowed through the clouds. The city below the palace never slept, filled with alien ships, glowing towers, and markets that traded everything from plasma crystals to the last dreams of dying stars. But inside the palace, silence ruled. Only the Empress's private chamber glowed faintly. Guarded by sentinels who stood like statues, Empress Virelna sat by a tall window of transparent diamond. Staring out into the endless void in her hand, she held a small hologram, a star map, filled with constellations long erased by war. Her mind, however, was not on the stars. It was on the human. She had met countless beings across centuries, conquerors, diplomats, slaves, and kings, yet none of them had spoken to her like Aaron Cole did. He did not tremble, did not flatter, did not hate. He simply stood there unshaken, and told her truths no one dared whisper, and now, those words echoed in her mind like thunder. Fear doesn't last forever. You can't rule forever by fear. Maybe I saw something worth looking at. The Empress frowned, closing her hand until the hologram vanished. Feelings were a weakness. She had buried hers long ago beneath crowns and wars. Yet something about this human stirred a fire she could neither name nor extinguish. Outside her chamber, the shadows moved. In the lower halls, High General Krell, commander of the Zareth legions, spoke quietly to a group of armored guards. The Empress grows distracted, he hissed, his scales glinting under dim light. This human is a poison. I saw it in her eyes. He clouds her judgment. Another noble, cloaked in red, nodded slowly. Then he must be removed. Krell's mandibles clicked in agreement. The Empress would not permit it, said one of the guards nervously. Krell's eyes burned with cold fire. She will not know until it's done. He turned to his soldiers. At dawn, the human dies above in the quiet of her room. The Empress felt an unease she could not explain. She stood and moved toward the great door that led to her private hall. Summon the human, she ordered the sentinel outside. The guard bowed and left swiftly. Moments later, Aaron entered. Dressed in simple dark clothes, his expression calm as always. You called for me, he said. The Empress nodded. I did, she replied softly. Walk with me. They moved through the grand corridor lined with statues of ancient Zareth queens, each carved with the same expression of power. But tonight that power felt hollow. Virelna's steps slowed as she glanced at him. Do you hate me? She asked suddenly. Aaron looked surprised. No, he said. Why would I? You've seen what I've done, she said, her voice lower. I've conquered, destroyed, enslaved. Aaron nodded slowly. Yes, he said. But I've also seen what fear does to rulers. He looked at her directly. It isolates them. She stopped walking, her eyes flickering with something fragile. You think I am alone? I know you are, he said simply. For a long time, neither spoke. Then she whispered, When I was a child, I was told I would rule because I was stronger than anyone else. She looked up toward the high ceilings, her voice almost trembling. No one told me that strength without peace feels like chains. Aaron's gaze softened. Then maybe it's time to break them, he said. Her golden eyes turned toward him again, and in them flickered both fear and wonder. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not since her youth. Not since before she became the Empress of Fear. Outside the palace, thunder rolled across the horizon, not of weather but of engines unknown to them both. General Krell's strike team was already moving through the tunnels beneath the throne hall. Energy rifles charged, blades glowing, their mission simple: kill the human and erase his existence. In the tower above, the Empress turned back toward the window, watching the stars shift and shimmer. Tell me, Aaron, she said softly, on your world, what did you fight for? Aaron's eyes grew distant. For those who couldn't fight back, he said. For the weak, the scared, the forgotten. He looked at her, his tone quiet but strong. Maybe that's what you've forgotten too. The Empress closed her eyes for a moment, feeling something she hadn't felt in centuries. Guilt, maybe sadness, maybe hope. Before she could answer, a sudden explosion shook the palace. The ground trembled, alarms screamed, and the lights flickered red. Aaron turned sharply, instinct kicking in. That's an attack, he said. The Empress's eyes blazed with fury. Who dares? She hissed. The doors burst open, guards shouting, Assassins! They're inside the palace. Aaron grabbed the fallen weapon from a guard's belt. His soldier's reflexes alive again. The Empress stood tall, energy crackling around her like a storm. Their eyes met for one brief, silent moment, and then both understood the storm had come. The betrayal in the palace. Smoke filled the upper halls of the Zareth palace. The sound of plasma fire echoed through corridors once filled with silence. Guards shouted orders, alarms screamed, and energy lights flickered red against the black crystal walls. The Empire's most secure fortress was now a battlefield. Empress Varelna stood at the center of chaos, her golden eyes burning with fury. Around her, loyal soldiers formed a desperate line, firing at armored traitors storming through the halls. They bore the insignia of General Krell, the mark of rebellion. She clenched her fist, the air trembling with raw power. "How dare they?" she whispered. "In my palace." But before she could act, another explosion tore through the floor above them. Debris rained down. Flames spread fast. Then through the smoke came Commander Aaron Cole, his human body moving with speed and precision the Zareth had never seen. He carried 2 plasma rifles, one in each hand, his face streaked with dust and light. "Your own men are turning on you," he said quickly. "They came to kill me, but they're after you too." The Empress looked at him, her anger sharp but her mind clear. "General Krell," she hissed. "He has forgotten who gave him his crown." Aaron nodded. "Then let's remind him." They moved together through the burning halls. The sight was surreal. The galaxy's most feared ruler and a lone human soldier fighting side by side. Every alien eye that saw it hesitated, unable to believe it. The Empress unleashed waves of golden energy that threw enemies against the walls. Aaron covered her flank, moving with deadly precision, his aim perfect, his stance unshakable. At one point, 3 rebels broke through the defense line, energy blades raised. Before the guards could react, Aaron charged forward, blocking one strike with his arm. The blade burned through armor and skin, but he didn't stop. He slammed his shoulder into the attacker, spun, and fired a burst point blank. The alien fell, lifeless. The Empress turned sharply, her eyes widening at the sight. "You're wounded," she said. Aaron shook his head. "Still breathing?" She raised her hand, and golden light wrapped around his arm. Healing, warm, powerful. Aaron looked at the wound closing before his eyes. "That's new," he muttered. The Empress smiled faintly. "You underestimate me." "And you underestimate humans," he replied. They pressed forward until they reached the central throne chamber. The great doors stood half open, the glow of battle spilling out. Inside, General Krell waited, his armor black as night, his claws dripping with energy. He turned as they entered, his voice filled with venom. "You've grown weak, my Empress," he said. "You let this creature whisper in your ear." Varelna's voice was cold. "I gave you power, Krell," she said, "and you repay it with betrayal." Krell laughed darkly. "You lost your edge the moment you spared him." He pointed a claw at Aaron. "You kneel before the sickness that destroyed its own world." Aaron stepped forward. Calm. "Funny," he said. "On my world, betrayal looked a lot like you." Krell roared and lunged. The Empress raised her hand, a wave of golden energy meeting his strike. The floor cracked beneath the force, shock waves shattering columns. Aaron moved like lightning, circling behind Krell, firing bursts into the weak points of his armor. But Krell was no ordinary warrior. He was a hybrid, enhanced by forbidden tech. He grabbed Aaron by the throat, lifting him from the ground, claws tightening. "You think your kind matters," Krell growled. "You're nothing but ancient dust." Aaron's voice came through strained breath. "Maybe," he said, "but dust can still choke giants." He twisted sharply, driving a hidden blade into Krell's neck. The general scream. D. Golden blood sprang across the floor. The Empress seized the moment, her eyes blazing like suns. With both hands raised, she unleashed her full power. A beam of energy struck Krell, tearing through his armor, blasting him across the chamber. When the light faded, the once mighty general lay still. Smoke rose from his shattered armor. The hall fell silent again, except for the crackle of fires. Aaron dropped to one knee, gasping. The Empress stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You could have fled," she said softly. "You could have saved yourself." He looked up, his voice quiet. "That's not what humans do." Her eyes softened. For the first time in centuries, someone had protected her. Not out of fear, but choice. She reached down, offering her hand. Aaron took it, their palms meeting. Human warmth against alien light. For a moment, neither spoke. But in that silence, The galaxy shifted. The Empress had defended her throne, yes, but something far greater had begun. An alliance born not of power, but of trust. Far below, whispers spread across the empire. The Empress fought beside a human, they said. The human who met her gaze and lived. And though no one dared say it aloud, the truth was clear. A new legend had begun, the spark of rebellion. The fires inside the palace had faded, but the storm outside had only begun. Across the vast empire of Zareth, word spread faster than any fleet could fly. Whispers moved through the dark alleys of conquered worlds, through slave camps and mining stations. The humans stood beside the Empress, they said, and he lived. On the frontier moons, where rebellion had long been crushed, small lights began to appear again. Coded signals, hidden frequencies, and on distant worlds, alien captains who had once feared the golden banner of Zareth now hesitated before bowing. Something had changed. Fear was no longer complete. Inside the throne chamber, Empress Virelna stood by the shattered window, watching the twin suns rise over her capital. Her crown lay on the floor beside her, cracked from the battle. She had ruled for centuries without a single question. But now her empire trembled not from enemies, but from an idea, from him. Commander Aaron Cole entered quietly, still wearing his damaged armor. He moved with the same calm strength as before, though his arm was bound in glowing medical wraps. "You should rest," she said without turning. "I've rested enough," he replied, his voice steady. "Your people haven't." She looked back at him, eyes soft but tired. "My people are disciplined," she said. "They will obey." Aaron shook his head slowly. "They obey because they fear you," he said. "And fear breaks faster than glass." He walked closer, lowering his voice. "You've built a kingdom of silence, Virelna, but silence hides anger, and anger doesn't sleep forever." For a long moment, the Empress said nothing. Then she whispered, "You speak as if you understand empires." Aaron smiled faintly. "I don't," he said, "but I understand people." They stood together before the massive window, looking out at the horizon. The city glowed, perfect, beautiful, obedient. But beneath that beauty, shadows stirred. Virelna could feel it, the same way she once felt the pulse of a dying star before it collapsed. "Your general's death will not be the end," Aaron said. "Others will rise." "They already are," she murmured, turning her gaze toward the distant fleet docks. "Reports from the outer sectors say the Drakkar colonies have refused tribute." Aaron nodded. "Because they saw what you did here," he said. "They saw you fight beside someone who didn't fear you." Her golden eyes turned toward him again. "Do you think that makes me weak?" she asked. He shook his head. "No," he said. "It makes you human." The word lingered in the air like a spark catching dry leaves. The Empress, the one worshipped as divine, now compared to a mortal from a forgotten world. And yet, for some reason, she didn't reject it. Instead, she asked quietly, "What does that mean to you?" Aaron looked at her with calm eyes. "It means you still have a choice," he said. "You can rule through fear, or you can lead through hope." The Empress turned away, her hands tightening on the railing. Hope. The word felt fragile, dangerous. Hope was how rebellions began, but as she stared into the sunrise, she realized something painful. Her empire had already begun to crumble the moment she met his eyes, not because he defied her, but because he understood her. In the days that followed, messages began flooding the palace. Reports of uprisings, of ships refusing orders, of banners burned. Advisors demanded executions. Governors begged for vengeance. But the Empress hesitated each time. She remembered Aaron's words. Fear doesn't last forever. One evening, she called for him again. He entered, bowing slightly, though still with that human ease that ignored rank. She looked at him and said quietly, "If I chose a different path, if I stopped the wars, what would happen?" Aaron met her gaze. "Maybe your enemies would unite," he said. "Maybe your people would rebel." He stepped closer. But maybe they'd start to believe. She studied him, this fragile creature from a broken planet, and realized something that made her heart tremble. He was not her prisoner, not her subject. He was the mirror she had avoided for centuries, and in that reflection she saw what her empire had lost. That night, when the twin moons rose again, the Empress made her decision. She summoned her fleet commanders and spoke words that shook the galaxy. "The wars end now," she said. "The conquests stop. The slaves are free." Gasps filled the grand hall. Fear rippled through every officer present. No one spoke, except the human who stood quietly at her side. Far away, across the stars, the first rebel signals turned into open celebrations. The Empress of Fear had spoken of peace, and beside her, the legend of the human grew stronger. Some called him a savior, some called him a weapon, but all agreed on one thing: the gaze that changed the galaxy. The galaxy trembled, not from war, but from silence. For the first time in centuries, the Empress of Zareth had ordered peace. Her fleets stopped their endless advance, her armies stood down, her banners were lowered, and across the stars, billions of beings looked up in disbelief. But peace was not welcomed by all. Beyond the Empire's borders, the rival powers stirred. The Thark Dominion, the Sorin Triumvirate, and the Vec Coalition. They had waited for this moment, the moment the Empress showed mercy. To them, it meant weakness. To them, the throne of Zareth was finally within reach. Inside the great war chamber, her council shouted in fear. "They are coming," said the Admiral. "A fleet of 5,000 ships." "They see your mercy as blood in the water," hissed another. But Empress Varelna stood calm, her golden eyes unshaken. "Let them come," she said. "This time, they will not face an empire of fear." At her side stood Commander Aaron Cole, the human whose defiance had lit a galaxy. He watched as holograms of approaching enemy fleets filled the chamber. "They'll strike within hours," he said quietly. The Empress turned toward him. "And you, human?" she asked. "Do you still believe in hope?" Aaron smiled faintly. "Hope only matters when it's tested." When the first enemy fleet broke through the border, the sky above Zareth Prime darkened, thousands of ships descended, energy fields glowing like storms. The palace shook as the first bombardments hit the upper atmosphere. Advisors screamed, officers panicked, but the Empress raised her hand and the chaos stopped. "Prepare the defense grid," she commanded, her voice steady. "Activate the planetary shield." Then she looked at Aaron. "You will lead my Round forces." Aaron blinked. "You trust me with your army?" She smiled softly. "You already led me, human." As he left for the battlefront, she turned toward the window, watching the black sky flicker with fire. For the first time in her reign, she prayed. Not to gods, not to power, but to the quiet light of the stars. "Let me not rule through fear again," she whispered. "Let me lead through courage." The battle raged for hours. Aaron led soldiers from dozens of alien races, fighting not for fear of punishment, but for the Empress herself. They shouted her name as they charged, their hearts burning with something long forgotten. Loyalty born from respect, and wherever Aaron fought, victory followed. In orbit, the Empress's flagship led the counterstrike, her voice echoed across all frequencies. "To every warrior of Zareth," she said, "fight not for my throne, but for the worlds behind you." Her words spread like fire, even reaching enemy channels. Some enemy ships hesitated, their captains confused, an Empress who spoke of peace, yet fought with honor. Such a thing had never existed before. At the peak of the battle, the Vec Coalition's super dreadnought descended through the clouds. A mountain of metal and hate, its main cannon charged, glowing brighter than a sun. The Empress's fleet was crippled, shields failing. Then came a voice through the comms. Aaron's voice. "Your Majesty, they're targeting the palace." She stood, eyes fierce. "Then we end it together." She took control of her flagship's main battery, a weapon powered by her own life force. Aaron, down on the surface, guided the ground cannons toward the same target. "On my mark," he said. "Ready?" she replied, her voice calm but heavy with something deeper. Acceptance. 3. The sky shook. 2. Energy surged through the air. 1. The human and the Empress fired as one. A blinding light cut through the heavens, piercing the heart of the enemy dreadnought. The explosion lit the sky like a second sunray, ice shaking the mountains for miles. When the light faded, the enemy fleets began to scatter, broken and terrified. The Empress had won, not through fear, but through unity. Hours later, as the fires cooled and silence returned, Aaron stood before her again, covered in ash and light. "You did it," he said softly. She shook her head. "We did it." Her voice trembled. "I've ruled for centuries, human, but only now do I understand what it means to lead." Aaron smiled faintly. "Then your empire has a chance." She stepped closer, eyes glowing softly in the dawn. "You were the only one who ever met my gaze without fear," she said. He looked at her, calm as ever. "And you were the only one who looked back." The two stood together at the edge of the balcony, watching the sun rise over a world reborn. Below them, the people of Zareth knelt, not in fear, but in respect, and somewhere, far across the stars, new voices began to whisper the legend. Every warrior bowed before the Alien Empress, until a human met her gaze. And from that gaze, a new galaxy was born.